What started as a child neglect investigation quickly turned into one of Ohio's most disturbing family cases. 16 children were rescued from horrific conditions, while shocking new revelations continue to emerge in court. As the investigation expands, prosecutors say this case may be far from over. Let's break down everything that happened.
Elizabeth Ciders, the mother of 16 children pulled from that house in Vinton County, Ohio, is in jail facing 16 felony counts of child endangering. But Elizabeth Ciders' problems don't end with her criminal case. She has another issue she's dealing with right now. I've learned that 33-year-old Elizabeth Ciders is pregnant again right now as she sits in jail. She's expecting, and I've confirmed Ciders hasn't just given birth to 16 children. That number is actually 18, and birth records prove it. Elizabeth Ciders gave birth to a set of twins in November 2022. The baby girls were conjoined, meaning their bodies were fused together, and they shared organs. Those babies died the same day they were born in November 2022. There's actually a grave marker that shows the twins were named Bailey Lee Ciders and Faith Ciders. So right now, it would appear that Elizabeth Ciders is actually pregnant with her 19th child. The children that Elizabeth Ciders shares with her husband, Gary Ciders Jr., are recovering, and at least one of the children is still in the hospital a little more than a week after they were found as deputies and state agents executed a search warrant at the house on Omer Street. The four Ciders family members, Gary Jr. and Elizabeth Ciders, and Gary Jr.'s parents, Gary Ciders Sr. and Christina Ciders, who goes by Lynn, face 16 counts of child endangering for the conditions the children were living in and the condition they were in when they were found. Were first arrested. They were actually charged with 17 counts of child endangering, but now that number's 16. I'm wondering if that was because Elizabeth Ciders is pregnant. It could be.
I think it's important to understand too that while Attorney Dory Bell and I are out here discussing matters together, and we did have an opportunity for three of the attorneys to meet with the prosecutor and go over some preliminary matters here. These matters are all separate and distinct. So while each of our clients have separately and independently, after consulting with counsel, waived preliminary hearing.
Now, it's still very early in this case, and there are more questions than there are answers. One big question surrounding this case was Children's Services, Ohio's Department of Children and Youth, aware of the Ciders family? Were they getting health and medical benefits from the state? That is a question I'm working to answer for you. I've learned the family likely moved around after Children's Services in one county paid them a visit, and the Ciders didn't want the children taken away. The four Ciders family members could face even more charges after the case is presented to a grand jury. Right now, they've pleaded guilty to the child endangering charges. Remember, there was a search warrant executed at the home for a separate investigation. That's how the children were discovered. That search warrant and affidavit remain sealed for that investigation. But we know that investigation is not related to four misdemeanor public indecency charges that Gary Ciders Jr. faces for alleged incidents in May at his home. Another new development in this case, the Vinton County prosecutor, William Archer, has asked the court for help to prosecute the Ciders. Archer filed a request with the court asking that the Attorney General's office and an elected prosecutor from another county, Highland County prosecutor Annika Collins, be appointed to assist with the case. That raises the question, will this Vinton County prosecutor, William Archer, not in Vinton County? Mark, since the last time we talked, we've confirmed that indeed these 16 children are the offspring of both Elizabeth and Gary Jr. She's been pregnant nearly every year since 2008, and they had another set of twins that were born conjoined and then passed away shortly after birth. So they have a total of 18 children. Your thoughts?
Well, it's remarkable. We read accounts of earlier American history where frontier families had 10, 12, 15, 20 children, many of whom didn't survive because the healthcare system was so dilapidated and weak at the time of those incidents in American history. But in modern times, most hospitals can keep babies alive and make sure they thrive. And so most of us, both on the air and watching right now, would say we just simply don't know any women who've had this many children, even when you count in twins, and some people have triplets.
So she's had a total of 18 children. There is some talk out there, and we're working to confirm this, that she may be pregnant right now. We don't know that for certain, but there is some discussion about that. So that's a lot of children, and I'm trying to figure out what the motivation would be to have so many children in this day and age, especially if you can't afford to take care of them.
Yeah, well, before I talk about that, let's just point out there are special problems that arise from a pregnant inmate. Both as an acting judge and a magistrate and a prosecutor, I've seen situations where we have pregnant inmates, and often jails won't take them. They present their own unique health problem that most rural jails are simply ill-equipped to handle. So she
babies, but I'm not sure about that. You mentioned Gary Ciders Sr.'s motion to modify the bail. And so his attorney, Dorian Baum, we had him on the other day, said that, he has some concerns about his potential competency, has mobility issues, but he's basically saying, look, this guy, he's 73 years old. He is not basically a threat to anybody. He will make all court appearances. He'll wear the GPS bracelet. They're asking to modify his bail. But then the question is, where does he go? I'm assuming maybe he has a family member who will take him in. But what do you make of his request for bail for Gary Sr.?
I did read the motion for modification of bond. Several things popped up. One is, early on, the defense counsel raises this notion that perhaps Mr. Ciders won't be competent to stand trial. But then later he says he fully, meaning Mr. Ciders, understands all the charges being brought against him. Trying to use that as a reason for why he ought to be able to be released, and he'll return, for the different court settings. Those two concepts obviously are at odds with one another. You can't be setting up an incompetency defense and then say, but by the way, my client knows very well this is a big case, he needs to come back. One thing that was not mentioned in that motion, I'm sure the prosecutor will raise to the judge, is one of the things that's considered when modifying bond is whether or not this defendant is a flight risk, whether or not he has a reason to flee the state, flee the jurisdiction. And somebody that old facing this many second-degree felonies is essentially looking at life in prison. That is grounds to be worried that this particular defendant might flee.
Well, it's certainly a concern, and in a case like this, because the charges are very serious, and because these four defendants all waived their right to a preliminary hearing, which, just for viewers who don't recall what that is, that's just where the prosecutor puts on enough evidence to show, look, we have probable cause that this crime was committed, and then the judge would say yes or no, you've met that bar. And then it gets passed over to the grand jury. They're saying basically there's enough evidence to go to trial. They all waived their rights to that hearing after it was scheduled to go on, and then it didn't go on. There are more charges, though, that could be coming at grand jury. This case will now go to the grand jury.
Yes, the grand jury, people should know that grand juries can be investigating grand juries where they see lots of witnesses and lots of evidence and try to find out what's happening. Grand jurors can ask for other things to be brought before them before they hand up indictments. So we know that the children, many of them are in area hospitals being treated. As they get treated, those that are verbal and can understand will tell the tale of who did what or who didn't do what. And that information will be brought in front of the grand jury. You don't have to bring the children down to the grand jury. An investigator who spoke to the children can testify to the grand jury. So very likely there will be separate additional charges brought, because every day you don't feed a child is another count of a second-degree felony, child endangerment. Every day that you don't care for a child is a new count. And so